This is a book review of a famous book called The Phenomenon of Man. It's written by a French paleontologist who was born in the latter part of the 19th century and died around 1950. His name was Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and this is one of his most famous books. In it, he puts forward a grand theory, a thesis, which attempts to combine his religious view as a Jesuit priest, as a devoutly religious person, with a scientific view of the world. And his basic argument is that evolution, which has been occurring on the planet for 4 billion or more years, has reached its highest point in terms of humanity today. And he looks back at the whole process, so starting with analysing the Earth before life started to multiply and proliferate into the many forms which we see around us today. So he looks at the geology of the Earth and he analyses the constituent parts which were there, the atoms, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, which eventually formed the molecules, which gave rise to ever more complicated chemistry, and then organic chemistry, and eventually living things, starting with very simple basic life forms which were able to self-replicate, and then from cellular organisms to multicellular organisms, which have continued to evolve and become more complex over time. And so his overarching view, he has tried to zoom out and look at the history of the Earth from the macro and considers evolution to have a purpose. In this book, he has attempted to say that what seems to be the function or the purpose of evolution, from very simple life forms all the way to us today as the most intelligent life form on the planet. He looks at the various important parts of this process. So he sees it as a continuum from inorganic, inanimate matter to the complex, intelligent life forms on the planet today. But he says there's a number of rapid improvements, and in the case of humans, what makes us unique and different from other animals is our self-awareness, our ability for self-reflection. So he argues that many animals know, dogs and cats for example, know they have consciousness, but they don't know that they know. And this is almost like a quantum leap in evolution, when humans became aware of their awareness, of their thought processes. And being a paleontologist, he zooms into this interesting period of history in which humans increasingly became self-conscious. And he talks about cave paintings in Spain and France, for example, 30,000 years ago. And extrapolates, so looking at the vast swathe of time that life has been evolving, he intuits from this big picture that life will continue to grow in complexity. And so he talks about a number of layers. So he talks about the geology of the Earth, which then, as a result of light from the sun ultimately being transferred into the complexity of biochemistry, photosynthesizing organisms, taking the energy and converting it into organic matter, there's a process of complexification. And he goes through the various stages of this process, but what he has attempted to postulate is that there is an arch, there is a direction, there is a purpose to the whole phenomenon of life, which in his view is to reach a point of complete and unification. So it's to reach a point of maximum complexification. And he calls that the omega points. So going back to the layers, you have the earth, the geology of the earth, the rocks and the minerals that are present. This gives rise to the biosphere. So if you look at everywhere on the planet today, there's living forms. Fishes in the sea, different creatures on the land, bacteria, viruses, there's living things everywhere. So there's a biosphere on the surface of the planet. And he has also talked about what he calls the noosphere. And the noosphere is the activity of humans, mainly as a product of their unique ability to think. So going back to that reflecting aspect, that self-awareness, we also have the ability to think and to be aware that we are thinking. And this has given rise to culture and civilizations and symbols that we use in language, for example, and much more sophisticated forms of communication. And he argues that all of this has a purpose, and it's towards greater unity. And that's the conclusion of where he says it's all going. And he calls the collective consciousness of the species, of man, he talks about the phenomenon of man, but he's really talking about humankind and people everywhere, how ultimately they're converging on a point of higher consciousness and complete understanding. So it's an interesting book. It's quite deep. It considers many different aspects of evolution and of history, and he attempts to discern or puts forward what he considers a unifying purpose of the whole evolutionary process. So it's a deep book. It might take quite long to get through it. It wasn't particularly easy to read because it is a translation from French, and because what he's talking about is highly complex. When it's been translated, it can be quite difficult to read because of the language and the subject matter itself being quite technical. It makes reading the translation of the original French even more difficult. But nonetheless, a thought-provoking book, was an interesting read. If you are interested, go and check it out. Thank you very much.